We're moving on to more analysis then of US foreign policy under Trump 2.0 or Trump 47. Choose your formula as you wish. What next for Israel then under President Trump? The US president calls himself the most pro-Israel US president in history. That's what he calls himself. And staunchly supported Israel during his first term, even before taking office for the second term. He proved instrumental in pushing Benjamin Netanyahu's government into signing a ceasefire deal. Remember, that's a deal that Joe Biden put on the table back in May. Emerald Maxwell has this.
The self-proclaimed best friend that Israel has ever had is back in the White House.
We're going to make Israel great again, and we're going to make America great again. We're going to make them both great again, greater than ever before. Token of affection.
Donald Trump portrays himself as Israel's steadfast protector, and his record reflects that. During his first term as US president, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and followed up by moving the United States embassy there from Tel Aviv, thereby undermining the cause of Palestinians who want East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. Trump also recognized the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel, a decision honored by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who named a planned settlement there after him. And the US president enabled illegal Israeli settlement activity with his Middle East peace plan, offering Israel the right to annex roughly 30% of the West Bank.
Under this vision, Jerusalem will remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided capital.
But all of this came at the expense of the Palestinians, who were further marginalized. Trump's peace plan, which they rejected, prompting clashes between protesters and Israeli armed forces, offered Palestinians a smaller, demilitarized state and denied millions of refugees the right to return.
Jerusalem is not for sale. And all our rights are not for sale and not for bargaining. Your conspiracy deal won't pass.
Also during his first term, Trump facilitated the normalization of ties between Israel and Gulf Arab states with the Abraham Accords, as well as with Morocco and Sudan. Although the political landscape has changed since October 7th and amid the devastating war in Gaza, Trump has renewed his first-term pledge to deliver peace in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Netanyahu, having buckled to heavy pressure from Trump in agreeing to the ceasefire deal, will expect US support over future control of Gaza.
Let's get more on Trump and the Middle East and bring in Bilal Saab. Bilal Saab is Director of Trends Research and Advisory Centre and Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Thank you for being with us. What's your sense of what happens next with Donald Trump in the Middle East?
I don't think it's going to be exactly what we saw in the first term. I think I don't want to make a broad statement here. Just like any other president in the second term, constitutionally speaking, that means he's not running again. He's going to have a little bit more latitude in foreign policy, and in particular on the Middle East, which means that whatever unconditional and very strong support that you saw for Israel in the first term, you might not see it actually in the second term. I know this sounds controversial or thought-provoking, but that's my assessment, my guess. The support is going to have to reconcile with two priorities of the administration in the second term in the Middle East. The first being achieving some kind of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. If actually you believe sincerely that the president is going to try to go for a Nobel Peace Prize, so that's going to require some Israeli concessions. And then the second is the issue of Iran, obviously. And that requires some kind of stability in the Middle East, obviously some kind of a deal or at least an ultimatum to the Iranians. And that in itself also is going to require some concessions from the Israelis. So that support that we're all very much accustomed to from the United States or from the administration, it does have a ceiling.
Bilal, focusing in on the situation in Gaza, it was only last March that Jared Kushner was talking about a kind of development deal for the Gaza Strip, bulldozing it, creating some kind of gated community, bussing out Palestinian families and putting them somewhere in the Negev desert. When that kind of thing is discussed, one can understand why people perhaps are very pessimistic or cynical about what might happen under Trump's administration.
Not necessarily. I would have put the cart before the horse. I think everybody very much understands that the pathway to peace and reconciliation in that part of the world is through the one and only two-state solution. Even the president himself understands that. Whatever economics discussion would happen afterwards, that's perfectly fine. But I don't think it has to be put at the forefront of any Middle East item on the agenda of the administration.
So, two-state solution, you'd say that Trump would sign up for that. He realizes that has to happen. How would he convince Benjamin Netanyahu to go along with that?
Well, exactly what I said before. I mean, he does have a lot of leverage. He does have a very strong desire to achieve something really historic in the Middle East. He wants to be remembered as someone who did something that no other predecessor of his in the entire history of U.S. foreign policy has been able to do. So that requires Israeli concessions. So, believe it or not, there's going to be a ton of behind the scenes negotiations between the American leadership and the Israeli leadership. And not, actually, it might not be Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We don't even know his political future, right? The stability of the cabinet itself right now is sort of, in question. But assuming he survives, right, given the controversial deal that he just signed with Hamas, controversial, of course, in the eyes of his extremist colleagues in the cabinet, assuming he survives, boy, he's going to have some kind of a tough negotiations and conversation with President Trump, who I believe has no problem using his leverage.
So Trump will do what needs to be done in order to get the result that he wants. Is the result that he wants exactly what the result that the Palestinians would want? I suppose that becomes the question too, because they're going to want things on their terms. They want things to be the way they would like them to be, and perhaps they will not correspond with what Israel wants.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the details are always going to be very important in here, and we've been trying to solve this conflict, as you very well know, for decades. So I'm not saying any of this is going to be easy, but all I'm saying is that there's a little bit more latitude on the part of this administration to push for things that previous presidents were not able to do because of certain influences on U.S. policy. I think the president has enough independent base, enough I would say, autonomous action on foreign policy, especially on the Middle East, a very strong mandate, remember, with Congress. I mean, he's pretty much got a free hand. And so it really is up to him, personally speaking, giving the order to his senior associates working on the Middle East. And he's got some heavy hitters.
Why didn't Joe Biden make as much progress? Joe Biden, friend of Israel, someone who supported Israel to the nth degree. Over what was happening in Gaza, perhaps tried to get Netanyahu to make his troops cease and desist in some way, shape or form, but that was never followed up by Israel, of course. Why did Biden not make the progress that perhaps he would have wanted?
I don't want to sit here and oversimplify it, obviously, but I think it comes down to one thing only, the inability or lack of desire of the former president to use his leverage and use the entire might of the national and of the United States to really push things forward. Also, don't want to completely discredit the administration. I mean, the reason why we're here now with the deal is that they've done some work themselves. But I also don't want to discredit the indirect or psychological influence of the incoming administration, because you got to remember, I mean, the Israelis knew that President Trump was coming to power, and so. I bet you that they obviously made concessions with that in mind, recognizing that whatever they put on the table is going to be nicely received, positively received by the administration. But to your point, my friend, I don't know. I mean, it's entirely disappointing, obviously, very much embarrassing, the fact that we were not willing or able to use our leverage. But things are going to change with this administration. I promise you that.
Indeed, one hopes there is peace. One hopes there are no more deaths. And one hopes there's some kind of way that these wounds can be healed, but of course it's going to take a lot of time. And as part of that, a lot of literal rebuilding. Is that something where you think Trump's influence will come into play? Will there be a kind of a Trump stamp on what is built? I'm not suggesting we revisit the Kushner plan, but some kind of influence happening there.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. And this is someone who has no problem discussing economics, investments, reconstruction. This is his sort of comfort zone. He's got the international connections. Everybody's going to want to work with him, be it the Europeans, be it the Arab Gulf powers, everybody who's got money, who has a vested interest in achieving peace and reconstructing Gaza and obviously Lebanon as well, is going to work with the president.
And how important will it be for Donald Trump to basically shore up Israel as it is, to look further east, of course, to what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iran? How important is it for Trump to make sure that he maintains what he needs there?
Well, look, let's start with personnel, okay? I mean, we still don't have a full picture of who's going to be occupying the National Security Council in terms of Middle East portfolios, right? We do know that he has some personnel there, but the team is not ready yet. And so these details that you just asked me about right now are still going to have to be hammered by the new team that's going to assume positions in the National Security Council, and also how they're going to find their counterparts in the entire interagency in the United States government. So that's in the Pentagon, that's in the State Department. A lot of people are leaving, right? But we still don't have everybody coming in. And so that's why you call it transition, obviously. A lot of these details that you're asking me about, they're going to have to be formulated and coordinated with all of these people, many of whom are still not in the building.
So many questions, the answers yet to come, but we sense there is something positive moving across the Middle East. And perhaps that could be because of the leverage Trump has. Bilal, thank you for joining us and giving us this sense of what is to come. Pleasure to have you on the program. That's Bilal Saab, Director of Trends Research and Advisory Centre, and Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Thank you for joining us, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your analysis with us.